From Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 7. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is filled with his glory. And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, for I am lost. For I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. The word of the Lord. You may be seated. This is the commissioning of Isaiah the prophet. I agree with those who believe that this is a projection of the temple, and in particular, the Holy of Holies, onto the heavenly screen, that this is a spiritualization. The Lord sitting on the throne as if it were the Ark of the Covenant. The seraphim being exaggerated representations of the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant. This is not meant to teach us about angelology, nor is it meant to teach us about what heaven looks like. Instead, it is meant to strike awe. Many of these same images are used in the book of Revelation, in the visions that John recorded there. And what this is meant to do is to help us understand how holy is the task of speaking the word of the Lord. Now, the context of this is the death of King Uzziah. Uzziah had been in decline for some time with the leprosy that came upon him because he had violated the ritual purity of the temple. His son Jotham had already begun to reign, if I am reading the sequence of events correctly. But Uzziah was the greatest of the kings since the times of Saul and David and Solomon. He had actually established, though Judah was a small nation, he had actually established a suzerainty with Ammon. And the influence of Judah was beginning to grow. He had fortified the walls of Jerusalem. He had raised an army. And he had caused the people of Israel to believe, as they had during the time of the great kings, to believe that they had power of their own. With his death came vulnerability. This was a time when kings would die and when succession would begin, when many kingdoms would begin to collapse, either from without or from within. And all of the things that the people of Judah had come to depend upon were now passing away. It was a time of uncertainty. And it is a time such as that in which Isaiah was called to speak the word of the Lord to a people who, like all peoples, begin to forget that God is their only hope of help and strength. The seraphim themselves, the word can mean fire, the word can mean serpent. Later in the book of Isaiah, we're going to read the darting fiery serpent representing an agent of God's destruction. And so I think that the appearance of the seraphim is also a threat. It is a reminder that God is not powerless, that neither the enemies of Israel nor Judah herself are immune from his wrath. And so when Isaiah sees the scene, and he sees the holiness of God, and he sees creatures mightier than himself in utter reverence in the presence of God, he is awestruck, and humility is his first response. When he hears them say, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, it seems that in the text he feels unworthy to answer their refrain. They call one to another, antiphonally as it were, and yet there's not going to be a response from Isaiah. He does not feel worthy even to utter the words. And when the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of the angel who called, The house was filled with smoke. Once again, images that are repeated in the book of Revelation. And Isaiah did what others have done throughout the biblical record when confronted with the holiness of God. He fell to his face. Remember, Peter did the same when confronted with the power of Jesus over the forces of nature. John did the same at the presence of an angel until he was quickly corrected. And a sense of unworthiness for the task to which he was called is what overwhelmed him. Perhaps Isaiah had come to this vision believing, because he was something of an aristocrat, because he was well trained, believing that he was somehow adequate for the task. But the sight of the Lord of hosts enthroned in glory dispelled all such notions. And so his response is, "Woe is me! I am lost. I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips." Now I know that in the ancient world, lips were sometimes metonymy for the whole person, and that the purification of lips sometimes represented the expiation of sin in its entirety. But I think there's more than that in this context. Isaiah knows that he's called to speak, and his unholy lips are on his heart. How can he accept the commission when he knows that he is not fit to speak what he just heard from the mouth of the seraphim? And so one of them flew to him, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched his mouth and said, "Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." For any of us who presume to speak the word of the Lord, whether it's from the pulpit in the presence of an audience, or in our families, or in our daily conversations, whatever the context there may be aware that where the word of the Lord goes, His presence goes, and that we are never far from the throne room, whether we see it or not. Thank you for your kind attention.